Hello and welcome. Take a moment to disconnect from the world outside. Tonight, we journey inward. We are going to explore the most private, most chaotic, and most mysterious territory known to humanity, the landscape of our dreams. For most of us, the dream world is a fiercely personal kingdom. It's a place where our anxieties, our hopes, and our memories are mashed together by some unseen, surrealist filmmaker. You can be flying over your childhood home one moment and taking a final exam you haven't studied for the next. It makes no sense, but it's your nonsense. It is a fundamental truth of our existence that our consciousness, our inner world, is our own. It is locked inside our skulls, a solitary and unique experience. But what if it isn't? What if that seemingly impenetrable wall between our minds is more like a thin veil? What if, under certain conditions, in the strange and lawless state of sleep, our consciousness can leak out? What if you could have a dream, a vivid and specific dream, and wake up to discover that someone you've never met, living on the other side of the planet, had the exact same dream on the exact same night? This is the unnerving concept of the shared dream. It's a phenomenon that strikes at the very heart of our understanding of self. It suggests a level of connection between us that is far deeper and stranger than we can possibly imagine. It whispers of a collective mind, a psychic internet that we are all unknowingly logged into. Tonight, we will investigate some of the most compelling and perplexing cases of shared consciousness. We'll begin with a modern mystery that spread across the internet, the unsettling story of a man whose face appeared in the dreams of thousands of people worldwide. We will then travel back in time to a tragic disaster, a day of unimaginable heartbreak that was preceded by a wave of shared, prophetic nightmares. And finally, we will look at a bold and controversial scientific endeavor, the Global Consciousness Project, an attempt to use technology to prove that our collective minds can, in fact, influence the physical world. We will be forced to ask some profound questions. Are these stories simply the product of coincidence and human suggestibility? Or do they point towards something real? A Jungian collective unconscious? A psychic field that connects all living things? Is it possible that when we close our eyes at night, we are not just entering our own private theater, but are sometimes logging into a shared universal dreamscape? Settle in and keep an open mind. We are about to explore the possibility that the most private space we know isn't so private after all. Our first case is a perfect mystery for the digital age. It began not in a dusty old book of folklore, but in the sterile, quiet office of a New York psychiatrist in January of 2006. And it revolves around a single, unforgettable face. A young woman, one of the psychiatrist's patients, had been having recurring dreams about a man she had never met. The dreams were unsettling, not necessarily because the man was frightening, but because he was a persistent, unknown presence. In her dreams, he would often appear and offer her calm, if cryptic, advice on her private life. The patient was so struck by the vividness of his face that one day, she drew a portrait of him on a piece of paper. The drawing was detailed. A man with a large, bald head, thick, dark eyebrows, and thin lips that seemed to be pursed in either thought or mild amusement. It was an ordinary face, yet deeply specific. She left the sketch on the psychiatrist's desk. The psychiatrist thought little of it, filing it away with his notes. A few days later, another of his patients, a man this time, was describing his own recurring dreams. As he spoke, he spotted the sketch of the mystery man sitting on the psychiatrist's desk. The patient stopped mid-sentence. His face went pale. He pointed at the drawing and said, "That's him. That's the man from my dreams." The psychiatrist was stunned. These two patients had never met. They had no connection to one another. Yet both of them were independently dreaming about the exact same unknown man. Intrigued and baffled, the psychiatrist made copies of the drawing and sent them to several of his colleagues who worked with patients suffering from recurring dreams. He asked a simple question: "Has any of your patients ever identified this man?" The responses began to trickle in, and the mystery deepened. Within a few months, other psychiatrists reported that their patients had also recognized the face. They all referred to him simply as this man. The dreams varied. For some, he was a benevolent guide. For others, a silent, unnerving observer. In one dream, he appeared as Santa Claus. In another, a Brazilian schoolteacher dreamed this man was flying beside her, and she felt an intense sense of peace and protection. Realizing this was more than just a coincidence, one of the psychiatrists created a website, thisman.org. He posted the portrait and a brief summary of the story, along with an open invitation. "Have you dreamed this man?" What happened next was an explosion. The story went viral. Testimonials began to pour in from all over the world. From Los Angeles to Moscow, from Tehran to Sydney. To date, the website claims to have received over 2,000 reports from people who are adamant that this specific face has appeared in their dreams. The stories are incredibly diverse, cutting across all cultures, ages, and languages, yet all linked by this single, enigmatic face. The mystery of this man became a global phenomenon, and theories erupted trying to explain it. One theory was archetypal. It suggested that this man's face is a manifestation of a Jungian archetype, a universal, primordial image that resides in the collective unconscious of all humanity. In times of stress or great change, our minds might conjure this archetypal image to help us process our experiences. His face, in this view, is a kind of default template for a wise paternal figure. Another theory was more religious, suggesting that this man was, in fact, an image of the Creator, a manifestation of God making himself known in the minds of his children. A more bizarre theory proposed that this man was a real person, a man with powerful psychic abilities who could enter people's dreams, a kind of real-life dream walker. Still others suggested he was part of a corporate conditioning experiment, a face secretly embedded in media to influence people on a subconscious level. For a few years, the mystery of this man was one of the internet's most compelling and unsettling unsolved cases. It seemed to be powerful, undeniable proof of a shared dream consciousness. Thousands of unconnected people, one identical dream face. But, as is often the case with mysteries that seem too perfect, there's a twist. And in this case, the twist unravels the entire story. The truth is, this man was a hoax, a brilliant, expertly crafted work of viral marketing and sociological art. The man behind it is an Italian sociologist and marketer named Andrea Natella. Natella is a master of guerrilla marketing and creating elaborate, reality-bending hoaxes to study how ideas spread in society. In 2008, he created the website and the entire backstory as psychiatrist, the patients, the initial drawing. None of it was real. He simply designed a face he believed was archetypal and generic enough to trigger false memories, a phenomenon known as source amnesia. He planted the story on a few forums, bought some ad space, and let the internet do the rest. And it worked better than he could have ever imagined. The story was so compelling, so perfectly designed to tap into our fascination with the unknown, that people began to genuinely believe they had seen him. Our minds are strange things. If you are shown a face and told, "Many people have dreamed of this man," have you? Your brain will start to search its vast, chaotic library of dream imagery. It might find a vague match, a dream you'd long forgotten about a bald man or someone with thick eyebrows, and the power of suggestion fills in the rest. Suddenly, you're convinced. You too have dreamed of this man. So, the case of this man is not a story of a genuine shared dream. But the phenomenon itself remains a fascinating mystery. It's a mystery about belief, memory, and the incredible power of suggestion. The story worked because it played on a deep-seated human intuition, the feeling that we are connected, that our minds aren't as separate as they seem. The hoax was a fake key, but it unlocked a very real door in the human psyche. And while this man might not be real, our next case involves a shared dream that was all too real, with consequences that were tragically permanent. We now travel back to a time before the internet, to a place where a real-world nightmare was about to unfold. We are going to the small mining village of Aberfan in South Wales in October of 1966. Aberfan was a close-knit community, a town whose entire existence was carved out of the coal industry. Perched on the steep hillsides above the village were massive, looming piles of coal waste, known as spoil tips. For years, the villagers had lived in the shadow of these man-made mountains. On the morning of October 21, 1966, after days of heavy rain, tip number 7, saturated with water, became unstable. With a horrifying, low rumble, it collapsed. Over 140,000 cubic yards of black sludge, rock, and slurry slid down the mountain at terrifying speed. It engulfed everything in its path, including the Panclas Junior School, where lessons had just begun. The disaster was catastrophic. 144 people were killed. 116 of them were children, most between the ages of 7 and 10, buried alive in their classrooms. It was a national trauma, a wound of unimaginable grief. In the aftermath of this horror, a London-based psychiatrist and researcher named John Barker became intrigued by persistent rumors circulating among the grieving families. Rumors that many people, not just in Aberfan but across Britain, had experienced premonitions of the disaster. He decided to investigate. Working with a newspaper, the Evening Standard, Barker put out a public call. He asked anyone who believed they had a premonition of the Aberfan disaster, in the form of a dream or a waking vision, to write to him. He wasn't expecting much of a response. He received 76 detailed letters. Barker meticulously analyzed these accounts. He discarded any that were too vague or could be attributed to hindsight. He was left with 60 cases that he considered to be highly compelling. These were letters from people all over the country, people with no connection to each other or to the village of Aberfan, and their premonitions were chillingly similar. The most common shared imagery was of an avalanche, a black mountain moving, or something dark and suffocating burying children. A 47-year-old woman from Plymouth dreamed she saw a group of children trapped in a rectangular room, trying to get out, with an adult comforting them. A man from Kent dreamed of a black, glistening mountain that was not there before. But the most heartbreaking and well-documented premonition came from within Aberfan itself. It came from a 10-year-old girl named Errol Jones. Errol was a student at the Panclas School. On the day before the disaster, October 20th, she told her mother, "Mummy, I'm not afraid to die." Her mother, puzzled, asked her why she would say such a thing. Errol replied, "Because I shall be with Peter and June," referring to 2 of her school friends. Then she described a dream she'd had. She said, "I dreamed I went to school and there was no school there. Something black had come down all over it." The next morning, Errol went to school. A few hours later, she was killed in the avalanche, along with Peter, June, and more than 100 of her classmates. Her story, corroborated by her parents, is one of the most powerful pieces of anecdotal evidence for precognition ever recorded. She had dreamed of her own death and of the exact nature of the disaster. Another Aberfan resident, a 67-year-old woman, had a vivid dream of a screaming child running from a black river. She was so disturbed by the dream that she insisted on keeping her grandson home from school that day, a decision that saved his life. What John Barker had collected was not just a series of individual premonitions. It was evidence of a shared, collective precognitive dream. Dozens of people, geographically separate and unknown to each other, had all seemingly tapped into the same future event. The sheer emotional and traumatic weight of the impending disaster seemed to cast a shadow backward in time, a psychic ripple that was picked up by sensitive minds across the country. Unlike the "this man" hoax, the Aberfan premonitions cannot be dismissed as suggestion. The reports were collected after the fact, yes, but the details, the shared imagery of the Black Mountain and the buried children, came from people who had no reason to lie. The case of Errol My Jones, in particular, stands as a tragic and profound testament to the mystery of precognition. The Aberfan disaster suggests that a collective consciousness might not just share symbols or ideas, but might also be capable of sharing a glimpse of the future, especially a future filled with such immense tragedy and sorrow. It raises the question: if our minds are connected enough to share a premonition of disaster, what else are they capable of? Is there a way to measure this connection, to prove it scientifically? This leads us to our final and most ambitious case study. For centuries, the idea of a collective consciousness has been the domain of philosophers, mystics, and psychologists like Carl Jung. It was an intriguing theory, but one that seemed impossible to test. How could you possibly prove in a laboratory that the minds of millions of people are connected? In the late 1990s, a group of scientists at Princeton University decided to try. And their tool was not a dream journal or a questionnaire, but a machine that generates pure randomness. This was the birth of the Global Consciousness Project, or GCP. The project was spearheaded by Dr. Roger Nelson, a researcher at the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, or PAIR. The central idea behind the GCP is both simple and profoundly strange. It revolves around devices called random number generators, or RNGs. An RNG is essentially an electronic coin flipper. It's designed to produce a stream of data ones and zeros that is completely, perfectly random. If you let it run, over time it should produce an equal number of ones and zeros with no discernible pattern. The GCP's hypothesis was this: what if these random systems could be influenced by the focused attention of human minds? What if a major global event, something that captures the hearts and minds of millions, or even billions, of people simultaneously, could cause these random generators to become slightly less random? In essence, the theory is that a powerful outpouring of shared human emotion and attention can impose a tiny bit of order onto chaos. To test this, the GCP set up a network of RNGs, also called eggs, in laboratories and homes all over the world. There are now over 65 of these eggs, from Fiji to Alaska, all continuously generating random data and feeding it into a central server at Princeton. For over 2 decades, this network has been silently listening, not for sounds, but for a whisper of our collective mind. The project has analyzed the data from hundreds of global events, and what it has found is, depending on your perspective, either groundbreaking proof of collective consciousness or a series of statistical flukes. The most famous and dramatic results came from the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. As the world watched the horrific events unfold, the GCP's network of RNGs began to behave strangely. The data stream, which should have remained random, showed a massive deviation towards order. The graphs produced by the GCP for that day show a dramatic, statistically significant spike that correlated precisely with the time of the attacks. It was as if the collective shock, horror, and grief of humanity had imprinted itself onto these machines. But here is where it gets even stranger, and it ties back directly to our previous story of the Aberfan premonitions. Some analyses of the 9/11 data suggest that the deviation from randomness didn't begin when the first plane hit the North Tower. It began 4 to 5 hours before the attacks. The machines, it seemed, were reacting to the event before it had even happened. Just as the dreamers of Aberfan felt a ripple from the future, the Global Consciousness Project's data appeared to show a pre-echo of the 9/11 trauma. This pattern has been observed in other events as well. The GCP has found significant deviations from randomness during the funeral of Princess Diana, during major natural disasters like the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, during global meditation events, and even during New Year's Eve celebrations, when millions of people are focused on a single, shared moment of hope and transition. The results, according to Roger Nelson and his team, are statistically undeniable. The odds of the correlations they found being due to pure chance are less than 1 in a trillion. To them, this is powerful, instrumental evidence that a global consciousness exists, that our minds are interconnected, and that this connection can exert a subtle but measurable force on the physical world. However, the GCP is not without its harsh critics in the mainstream scientific community. Skeptics argue that the project is a textbook example of pseudoscience, plagued by confirmation bias and what's known as p-hacking or data dredging. The critics claim that the GCP's researchers decide which events to look at after the fact, allowing them to cherry-pick the data that fits their hypothesis. They also point to the file drawer effect, the possibility that the researchers only publish their successful findings, while ignoring the many times the data showed no correlation. The statisticians who have reviewed the work are divided. Some agree that the results are anomalous and hard to explain. Others maintain that given the sheer amount of data being generated, finding seemingly meaningful patterns is inevitably like seeing a face in the clouds. The Global Consciousness Project remains a deeply controversial but undeniably fascinating endeavor. It is a bold attempt to drag the ethereal concept of a shared mind out of the realm of philosophy and into the world of hard data. Whether you see it as proof of a psychic connection or just a statistical illusion, it represents the ultimate expression of the question we've been asking all night. Are we alone in our own minds, or are we all nodes in a vast, invisible network? We have journeyed from the strange, viral tale of a shared dream face to the tragic, prophetic nightmares of a mining disaster, to a global network of machines listening for the heartbeat of humanity. We are left with a collection of stories and data that all point towards the same unsettling conclusion. Our minds may not be the private fortresses we believe them to be. So, how can we possibly explain this? How can dreams and consciousness be shared? The theories are as profound as the phenomenon itself. Our first explanation is the most skeptical and grounded one. It's all a combination of coincidence, suggestion, and misinterpretation. This theory elegantly explains the "this man" phenomenon. It was a fabricated story that used the power of suggestion to create false memories in a suggestible population. For cases like Aberfan, the skeptic would argue for hindsight bias. After a disaster, people search for meaning and may retroactively interpret a normal, anxious dream as a specific premonition. The dozens of people who had premonitions are notable, but what about the millions of people in Britain who didn't? As for the Global Consciousness Project, the skeptical argument is clear. It's a case of finding patterns in random noise, a statistical illusion born from a desire to find meaning. This explanation is rational, and it likely accounts for a great many supposed psychic events. But it struggles to fully account for the specificity of the Aberfan dreams, the shared imagery of the Black Mountaineer, the sheer statistical unlikelihood of the GCP's data, which even some critics admit is anomalous. This brings us to our second, and perhaps most famous theory, Carl Jung's collective unconscious. Jung, a student of Freud, broke with his mentor by proposing that beneath our personal unconscious, there lies a much deeper, shared layer of the psyche. This collective unconscious, he argued, is not based on personal experience but is inherited. It's a psychic reservoir containing the accumulated memories and experiences of all humanity, expressed through universal symbols and patterns called archetypes. This theory provides a powerful framework for understanding shared dreams. This man, even as a hoax, worked because his face may have touched upon an archetype of a wise old man or guide that lives within all of us. The shared premonitions of Aberfan could be explained as a massive traumatic event creating a powerful disturbance, a ripple, in this collective field, which was then picked up by individuals who were more psychically sensitive or in tune with this deeper layer of consciousness. The dreamers weren't seeing the future through a psychic window. They were feeling a tremor from the collective soul of humanity. Our third theory is a more modern, biological take on Jung's idea, Rupert Sheldrake's theory of morphic resonance. Sheldrake, a biologist, proposed that memory is not just stored in our brains but is also inherent in nature itself. He suggests that all self-organizing systems, from crystals to human societies, are shaped by morphic fields, which contain a kind of collective memory. Once something happens a certain way, a crystal forms, an animal learns a new skill, a memory is created in this field, making it easier for that same pattern to occur again anywhere in the world. In this view, a shared dream could be a case of individuals tuning in to a specific morphic field. Perhaps a powerful dream or idea, once had, creates a field that other people can then access, leading to a cascade of similar dreams. It's a controversial theory, but it attempts to ground the idea of a collective mind in a more biological, field-based model of reality. Finally, we have the most speculative, but perhaps most tantalizing explanation, one that comes from the strange world of quantum physics. This is the idea of non-local consciousness. We know from quantum mechanics that particles can become entangled, linked in such a way that measuring one instantaneously affects the other, no matter how far apart they are. Einstein famously called this spooky action at a distance. Some physicists and philosophers of mind have drawn a bold metaphor from this. What if consciousness itself is a non-local phenomenon? What if our individual brains are more like terminals or receivers connected to a single universal field of consciousness that exists outside of space and time? If this were true, shared dreams would not be so mysterious. They would simply be moments when two or more terminals happen to access the same stream of information from the universal field. The Global Consciousness Project's findings would be evidence of this field responding to a massive, coherent input from millions of its terminals. This is, of course, a massive leap of logic, applying quantum principles to the macroscopic world in a way most physicists would not endorse. But it remains an intriguing and powerful metaphor for explaining a phenomenon that seems to defy our classical understanding of the world. From coincidence to quantum physics, the explanations for shared consciousness are as vast as the phenomenon itself. We are left at the edge of a great mystery, peering into the nature of what it means to be an individual and what it means to be part of a whole. The evidence, while not conclusive, is deeply suggestive. It points to a world that is far more interconnected and far less lonely than it often feels. And now the question falls to you. What do you make of all this? Do you believe that shared dreams are simply a trick of the mind and the power of suggestion? Do you find Jung's idea of a collective unconscious compelling? Or do you think science, with projects like the GCP, is on the verge of proving that our minds are truly measurably linked? And on a more personal level, have you ever experienced this? Have you ever shared a dream with someone? Or felt a premonition that turned out to be true? The comments section is our own small corner of the collective mind, a place to share these stories and discuss these profound ideas. I want to hear your experiences and your theories. If this exploration of the inner cosmos has sparked your curiosity, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It's your engagement that allows us to continue our journey into the uncharted. And don't forget to click the notification bell, so you'll be here when we venture into our next great mystery. Thank you for joining me tonight, and as you drift off to sleep, perhaps wonder, just for a moment, who else might be dreaming with you?